is the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio really the problem with seed oils, or is it more of a volume and sourcing problem? Let's unpack this real quick. So a lot of people make this argument, either for or against seed oils, that's, it's just an omega-6 to omega-3 ratio issues. In other words, our ideal ratio, traditional diet, say go back to 1850s America, or like traditional diets around the world before eating a Western diet, was that our ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 was 4 to 1 or even 1 to 1. Okay, fair enough. What changed that? Well, obviously the introduction of processed food and seed oils have changed that ratio to now we're looking at 20 to 1 or maybe greater. But hold on, is the ratio the only thing that's changed, and is that the most important factor that we should be concerned about? Because, of course, the response to affecting the ratio is that we should be supplementing with omega-3 supplements, like fish oil, essentially, right? Does that really solve the problem? Well, I don't know. Let's look at what the problem. The problem might be, 1, volume, or 2, the source of these fatty acids. So if we go back to our traditional diet, where do we get our polyunsaturated fats from? The omega-6, omega-3, where did they come from? And how much were we consuming? Well, we've established that the processed food has increased the volume. How much? Well, we know from Stephen Guyenet's study looking at the increase in our body fat of these polyunsaturated fats that is increased from 1959 to 2009. Our body fat storage of these polyunsaturated fatty acids has increased from 9% to 21.5%. And that was 15 years ago. So it's probably higher than that now. It could be easily 25% of our body fat. And that's got to come from our diet, because we can't create these fats, right? We only create saturated fat. From saturated fat, our body can create polyunsaturated or monounsaturated fat. But the polyunsaturated fats has to come from our diet. So we know it's coming from our diet, and it's increased the volume to the point that we're storing 5 times more than we should, than our traditional diet would have us storing, which have been, 3 to 5% versus 21 to 25% of our body fat. So the volume has increased. So if we just address volume, does the ratio really matter? In other words, if our body fat, the fat that we're storing, the percentage of our body fat is 20% of omega-6 and omega-3, does it really matter what the ratio is? Or is the problem that we've grown from 3 to 5% of our body fat made up of these fats to 20%? I mean, let's say you had 20% of your body fat is made up of polyunsaturated fats, but it was a 1-to-1 ratio. Don't you think you'd still have a problem because the total volume had increased? Whereas if your body fat is only made up of, say, 3% polyunsaturated fat, would you really care if it was a 20-to-1 ratio? I wonder. As long as you're getting, is it, because the current studies are saying, well, isn't it more about having enough omega-3? Does the ratio really matter as long as you're getting an adequate amount of both omega-6 and omega-3? Understand that these fatty acids, these are essential fatty acids, meaning they have to come from our diet. As I said before, we don't create them. They have certain roles, and it's not for fuel. The role of omega-3s and omega-6s is not as a fuel source. That's what we use saturated and monounsaturated fat for, ideally. They, like the omega-3, DHA and EPA, serve certain roles in our brain, right? For neurons and for cell communication, and in our retina. And then both omega-6 and omega-3 are in our cell membranes to create that kind of the fluidity that it needs to have nutrients passing in and out of that cell membrane very easily by keeping their shape. And so the role of these fatty acids, again, not for energy, but specific, we need a minimal amount for specific functions, not to use them for energy. And we know that from the study in Padua, 2002, that they create actually much less energy. Omega-6 and omega-3 create less energy Then the saturated and monounsaturated fat. I think omega-6 is 60% of the energy from saturated fat, and omega-3s are 25% of the energy from saturated fat because they are so oxidative. Okay, and then we have the sourcing. Well, again, why is it increased? Well, because of processed oils in our processed food and from cooking with them, as shifting away from animal fats as our cooking fats in restaurants and in homes to these processed oils, right? The soybean oil, the canola oil, the safflower and sunflower oils. And so when we extract those fats, as opposed to these fats coming into our diet through nuts, seeds, fish, which are in a food matrix where they are protected from oxidation while they're in that food until we eat them. And then when we eat them, for instance, like nuts and seeds come with come with vitamin E, which is an antioxidant, which helps offset the oxidative stress caused by metabolizing these fats. Plus, again, we're eating a much smaller amount of them from a natural source. Remember, when we just had these from natural sources, they made up of 3 to 5% of our body fat. Now that we have an unnatural source, or an extracted oil as our primary source, that makes up 80% of our fat calories, 30% of our total calories in the Western diet, and these now make up 20% of our body fat. So our body's trying to process these for energy. We're using them, we have far more than we need for their basic functions, right? The fundamental functions that we needed these essential fats for. And now our body's starting to store them and doesn't like to burn them because they create so much oxidative stress when we burn them. So the sourcing is, one, they're oxidizing the minute they're extracted. And when they're extracted without the antioxidants that are naturally occurring in the food. So they're oxidizing as soon as they're extracted, and then we try to metabolize them, again, without the antioxidants that would normally come with them within the food, and we have even more oxidative stress in our mitochondria. So it's more of a volume and sourcing issue than a ratio. Again, if you have a normal amount of these in your body, 3 to 5%, would the ratio really matter? Would you even notice? As long as you got enough omega-3s, would you really care if you had 20 times more omega-6? Probably not. If you, with 20% of your body fat made up of these polyunsaturated fats, and you had a 1-to-1 ratio, say you have a perfect 1-to-1 ratio of omega-6 to omega-3, but you still have 20% of your body fat, so in a volume 5 times greater than what you need, 5 or 6 times greater than what you need, would the ratio matter, or would you still have inflammation because both of these fats are highly oxidative? Okay, omega-3s are more oxidative than omega-6s because they have more open double bonds to allow the oxygen molecule, or oxygen really free radical, to come in there and create oxidative stress. Omega-6 fatty acids have 2 open double bonds and then hydrogen vents around them, right? The omega-3s can have 3 or 5 or 6. In fact, the EPA and DHA have 5 or 6 open double bonds, allowing them to be much more oxidative or create more oxidative stress because they have more open, vulnerable places for those free radicals to get in there and create oxidative stress. So the omega-3s create more oxidative stress than omega-6. So there you go. Supplementing with them isn't helping. Again, we come back to, it's a volume. We have too much of it in our body to deal with, creating an abundance of oxidative stress that there's no way our antioxidants, whether eaten dietarily or endogenously like glutathione and NAD, can handle. We have more oxidative stress created by these fatty acids than our body can continue to handle over a period of years, creating more oxidative stress. So again, the ratio issue becomes very small and insignificant in light of the one, increased volume by 4, 5, 6 times what it would be in a traditional diet, and then the source. From nuts and seeds, where I think we'd be quite all healthy if we got an abundance of linoleic acid from nuts and seeds, to these processed oils, which are oxidizing the minute they're extracted, and even more so when we try to metabolize them, or essentially in our mitochondria, burn them with oxygen and create even more oxidative stress within our cells, within the mitochondria, impacting our energy metabolism, leading to more metabolic disease. How to resolve it? It's not taking more highly oxidative fish oil, is it? Change the source and you change the volume with one simple move. Remove the seed oils, remove the processed food, cook with animal fats, traditional animal fats, which are stable, and get your polyunsaturated fats, if you have them, from whole food sources, from fish, from the nuts and seeds, even from the pork and the chicken that has more than, say, a ruminant animal like a cow would. Realizing that within the food source, whether it's an animal or a plant, it's still stable and it comes with nutrients that help you stabilize it when you're metabolizing it, versus the oils, which come with no protection. They've been removed from their protected whole food source, no longer have the antioxidants to help offset the oxidative stress from metabolizing them, which is what's creating all of the oxidative stress and inflammation that Dr. Simopoulos was probably observing when she created her theory around these omega-6 to omega-3 ratios. So, real simple. Eliminate the processed oils, go back to whole food sources. You're safe from the dangers of these polyunsaturated fats.